Oh, welcome into the Russ Joy Show. I'm Russ Joy. Figured that out because you're smart. It's also the name of the show. Happy Fun Friday. Woo! It's a trade deadline day. Woo! Hold on, let's see. Can I get the weird Mac things to go? I think it's like you're supposed to do like a V or something and it's supposed to do a celebration. It didn't work. That's okay. That's okay. Thanks for letting me down, Mac. Very sad. I'm devastated now that didn't work. And I feel like a total buffoon. You know, here, let me see. Let's try this one more time. Welcome to Trade Deadline Day! Woo! There we go. We're here. There we go. I got it. Could today be the day that Scott Laughton gets traded? Finally! Could we see a trade today? I don't know. We're about to find out. Now, I do have a little bit of news and notes, a little bit of a rundown of today's show because we have a bunch of things to get into. I will be back later today. I'm pretty much guaranteeing now, for better or worse, I will be back here once the trade deadline hits. So the show might go live at 2:45 to catch the last few minutes leading up to the deadline. The show might go live at 3 o'clock as soon as the deadline is over. But I will be doing a trade deadline show later today. So we're going to get into some hypotheticals, and then unfortunately, part of the show might prove to just, not have a very long shelf life because we're going to get into whether or not I think Scott Laughton, Rasmus Ristolainen, Andre Kuzmenko, Cam York, Ryan Poehling, if any of those guys could be traded today. And again, when we talk to each other, not that many hours from now, 6 hours from now, 7 hours from now, we'll see if any of what I said was right. We also have to get into Zack Baun re-signing with the Eagles, another shocking, do we want to call it a shocking signing? The day after the Saquon Barkley signing goes through, the Eagles bring back a guy that I think a lot of people kind of imagine would be the priority, but I think a lot of people were getting ready to move on from in Zack Baun. How he gets it done again. And there was a very interesting clip of Trea Turner talking about wanting to lead off. So we're going to get to all of that and more today, but before we dive into what is going to be a swashbuckling show, I'm going to go out to the comments because that is ultimately where many days start here on the Russ Joy Show. So let's go over to the comments. First, remember, if you're on Twitter/X, you'll need to make sure that you click on the video first, go into old Periscope mode, and from there, you can submit a comment. Otherwise, you're just kind of tweeting into the void, and I can't see it, and it's very sad. So YouTube is always the place to go. It's always the best call. But in fairness, if you're looking to comment on X, that's how you do it. Chris Reed says, Danny Briere may earn the title of being the very poor man version of Ed Wade today. I assume that that's referring to the fact that if he doesn't make a trade today, that makes him Ed Wade. We'll get into it. We'll get into whether or not I think Danny Briere has any flexibility today when it comes to the fan base. Listen, he's going to do what he thinks is best for the organization. But there is going to be a large segment of fans that are going to be very angry and very disappointed if no trades are made today. We're going to get into all that in a little bit.
But Russ, he did make a trade. He did get rid of 2 players. You said all along, get rid of at least 2 or 3, and then it's a success.
He did. We're going to get there in a little bit. Greg Bondarenko with a happy Friday, all. Andrew Fawcett, our friend in Texas, says, morning, y'all. Driving to work on this trade deadline day, Friday. Cheers. Good on you, fella. Raymond Supper says, Toronto fan base is demanding a third-line center and depth defense, and they don't care about picks. They don't care about prospects. No excuse for Flyers to not get a big return for Laughton and Risto. There's a chance that Toronto might be back in after something that happened last night. We'll talk about that again shortly. Adam Glickus with a joy to the world. It's trade deadline day. It is. Will it be a joyous day for all of us? Well, we'll find out. Jamie asking the question that needs to be asked. Do we lose Scott Laughton today? We're going to get there in a second. Landros 2. Why would the Flyers be busy in a seller's market when they are in a rebuild? Sometimes fans expect too much. Laughing, crying emoji. Sean C. says, got a feeling the Flyers are totally going to fumble this deadline. Seller's market, and they'll still fail. Adam Glickus, yes, load up, Danny B. Sell, and I'll tell you this, if I'm Danny B and I got an offer for him, Airson is out of here. Ooh, turning on Airson. Here we are. Jim Cochran says, look at that slick new haircut. Oh, yeah. Got it trimmed up a little bit. Got it shaped up a little bit. A little texturizing. It was getting very out of control. Now, this isn't perfect, and I didn't put anything in my hair this morning because I didn't have time. But we're getting there. I feel a little bit better about this one than the very heavy mess that it was a week ago. Let's see. Greg Bondarenko says, great way to start the show. Thank you. I guess that was the fireworks. I spare no expense here at the Russ Joy Show. Adam also notes it takes up until 4 o'clock for all the trades to roll in. I think we'll have a good idea. We also happen to have a direct line to people who would matter and be able to tell us if things are going to happen or not. Ford says, so you got a bit of hair's cut, but still long. Frames your massive head nicely with the motor oil in it. Thank you, Ford. Thank you. That's the nicest thing anyone's ever said. Sean C. with it's nice to see the Flyers do have a starting point for Risto, though. The asking price seems to be like an off-season ask, though, in my opinion, for a player his caliber. I think that's probably true. Let's see. Ford says, Russ stuck at 774 subs on YouTube, has been for days now. That is incorrect. We were at like 771 a day or two ago, so we're getting there. We're getting there, but maybe does that mean it's time for a giveaway? Oh, I don't know. I'm going to get to 1,000. 1,000 feels like a successful channel. Not looking for 10,000, although if we ever get there, it'd be great. Getting to 1,000 would feel very nice. We're getting there, slowly but surely. We're chugging along. CMZ says, if Laughton or Risto isn't dealt, I'm going to fucking snap. Woof. Let's see. Lettuce looking fresh. Andrew Fawcett says, if Danny sits on his hands, I'm asking a lot of questions. Jamie Rollo, says, not expecting much today. No one overrates their players like the Flyers organization. K-Dub says, not getting my hopes up for any Flyers moves today. Jim Cochran asks a question about the Eagles. We might get there in a bit. Is there some sort of beef between Slay and CJGJ? Saw something, but not details. I could touch on this really quick. Slay went on a podcast. I don't remember which podcast it was, earlier this week. And when he was asked about like leaving the Eagles, the question kind of came up about leadership and, with Slay out of the locker room, who's the next man up or whatever. And he kept saying Reed Blankenship. And then he pointed out that, a lot of those young guys don't hold themselves like young guys. They hold themselves like vets. And he kept saying Reed Blankenship. And he didn't say CJGJ. And if you remember earlier in the season, Slay goes on Micah Parsons' podcast, and it felt like sort of shaded CJGJ. That didn't go over well. And then presumably they kind of made amends. But CJGJ sort of, in a way, called him out on Twitter over the last few days. Not by name, but very clearly was upset with the fact that Slay apparently doesn't view CJGJ as enough of a leader to be considered. And Slay just kept saying, Reed. That's all it was. So I don't know what ultimately is going to come of it. I think it probably slams shut the door on the possibility of Slay coming back. There were rumors out there that maybe the Eagles and Slay could look to come up with a one-year deal at a lower number. I just don't see it happening. I really think he's probably going to go back to Detroit. And he, I don't know. I feel like he said that this is going to be his last year, or that this could be his last year. I think that's about it. Like, I really don't know. So that was it. That really, in a nutshell, is what happened. Now, I want to get to the Flyers stuff, then we'll get to Baun, we'll get to Trea Turner. You know what? Maybe we should start the other way. Go to Flyers last, so that if none of it is relevant, and the people who listen after the fact in the podcast, they can just stop listening once we get done the Baun and the Trea Turner. Let's do that really quick. That actually makes a little bit of sense. Good job, Russ. You thought of something. You used your massive dome to think about it. Now, I know a lot of people are here for the Flyers talk. We're going to get there in a minute, I promise. Let's just touch on a couple of things here really quickly. So earlier this week, and it's funny, Howie does this on days that I have a show, but he waits until the afternoon, so I can't talk about it on the show in the morning, which is very, very upsetting. But on Wednesday, Howie went and made a massive move, a move that I think a lot of people were hopeful was going to come to fruition, but it did. Zack Baun re-signs with the Eagles a 3-year deal worth $51 million, $34 million guaranteed at signing, with another $1.5 million in incentives and escalators. That makes him one of the highest paid linebackers in the NFL. Now, the cynic in me says Zack Baun was never this good before. His first year under Vic Fangio turns him into an all-pro, turns him into one of the best linebackers in the game. And so there's a very small cynical part of me that had this been like 2006, coming off of many losses in the NFC Championship game, coming off of Donovan puking in the huddle, 2006 me would probably look at this and say, oh, well, of course he's going to regress this year. He's going to go back to being that mediocre-ish player. And the Eagles are going to be on the hook for a 3-year massive cap hit. But the new and improved version of me that has now lived through 2 Super Bowl wins, 3 Super Bowl appearances, says, yeah, I'm going to trust Howie. And I'm going to trust the organization that they're right. And that Baun is going to replicate his production again next year, or at least stay very close. That would be my hope. Baun is a massive piece of that team. Massive. I think they probably have to get another linebacker either in free agency or in the draft. Nakobe Dean, you have to hope, is going to come back healthy. But it's a really nice signing. That's all I have on the Eagles. This isn't an Eagles-heavy show. I'm just going a little bit chronological. Now, there's one other thing that I wanted to get to before we get to the Flyers talk, because, again, we're going to be doing another Flyers show today to react to the actual deadline. So you guys can get your questions, comments, and concerns in, and we'll be fine. Trea Turner, who's like not persona non grata, but Trea Turner, who's been a pretty massive disappointment since being here, was over on WIP on their afternoon show on Wednesday down at spring training. And the question was asked about whether or not he would want to lead off. And like, this is going to continue to be one of those questions throughout the rest of spring training and probably early into the season is, are they really going to go back to Kyle Schwarber as the leadoff guy? Or could they look to put Trea Turner at the top of the lineup, have him use his speed, have him steal bases, have him cause mayhem on the base paths early and often in games, and maybe even, give Kyle Schwarber somebody to drive home? Wouldn't that be nice? So we're going to really quickly go over to what Trea Turner had to say. I don't think any of it is entirely shocking, but we'll go there, and then we're getting back to the Flyers. Here we go.
Seemingly out of camp so far is you possibly going back to the leadoff spot and being this team's leadoff hitter. Is that something that excites you, and do you think it can take your game even to another level getting back to that spot?
Yeah, I haven't done it in a long time. Last time I done it was 2019.
I don't know how many people are aware of that he hasn't been a leadoff guy since 2019. I think that a lot of times when you think about Turner, you probably thought that he might have been hitting leadoff just like leading up to when he signed with the Phillies. So you would have thought that maybe like 2020, 2021 he was leading off, but he wasn't. So it's been a while. Clearly, Schwarber has been the guy at the top of this lineup, and it has worked out really well. But we'll get back over to Trea. Look at him. He looks excited.
Had a good year for me. I think I said this before, and we all say it, and we'll hit wherever Rob wants us to, wherever the coaching staff wants us to. We'll hit wherever because we want to win. We don't care. If that is leadoff, it's 2, 3. I hit 8. A couple of years ago. Hopefully that doesn't happen again. But yeah, we'll hit wherever, and that does excite me in the sense of maybe I can run a little more, score some more runs. The last couple of years I'm trying to drive the ball a little bit more, and not that I won't do that if I do lead off, but that getting on first with no one in front of me type deal to lead off a game, I think can put a lot of pressure on the other team. And
I think that's a totally fair point, by the way. And like, I had this chat with Ant last night, who's going to be bringing, remember, Ant and Bob, going to start the What Is Old Is New Again. The Fighting Words podcast is going to come under the Joy umbrella, the Joy Media umbrella. So I talked to Ant last night at the game, and I was like, what do you think? And he's like, it's a terrible idea. Ant is like very against Trea Turner being the leadoff guy, so you'll get to hear a lot more about that. Conceptually, I get it, though. The idea of him being able to not have to worry about trying to hit the gaps, about him not having to try to pound the ball out of the park, him being able to just do whatever it takes to get on base and then causing mayhem, I think that there is something to it. It just comes down to whether or not he's going to be able to get on base consistently enough at the top of the lineup for it to make sense. Well, we'll go back to him real quick.
Maybe we can have some big innings early on. Maybe not bigger, but big innings early on, and kind of get downhill early on. So I'm excited if it happens. I'll be excited if I hit wherever, though. I'm just excited to be back, and I love the game, love playing, and I think we've got a good squad.
So I'll be interested to see what happens. And I will tell you that while I have been very demure about the Phillies to this point, there is part of me that is getting very excited again about Phillies baseball because, as I have reiterated many times on this show, I don't like watching bad baseball, but I'm all in on good baseball. I think this lineup is going to be infuriating for stretches of the season, but I think that the rotation is going to be very good. And I think ultimately they're going to win a good amount of games, and I'm going to take the family down, and we're going to go watch the Phillies at Citizens Bank Park. I think we're going to try to plan 1 or 2 road trips this summer I've always wanted to get out to PNC Park. I've never been out there, so I kind of want to take the kids out to Pittsburgh. We went down to D.C. last summer, 2 summers ago, did the National Mall, did the museums, went to Phillies Nationals. I think we'll do that again. Do we dare go up to New York? Go see them play at Citi Field? I don't know about that. But I can feel the Phillies fever. It's starting to course through my veins at least a little bit. But we'll get back to the Phillies next week. And we'll get back to the Eagles next week. And, Ford, to his credit, understands it. But, Ford said over here, about the Flyers discussion, understanding it. But Sixers suck, which is a shame. Never had a basketball season. Eagles season is done and ended in perfection. Phil's ? Yeah, we're going to get back to the Flyers because, for better or worse, they are the lead story today. Now, Sports Talk Radio will probably do a whole lot of talking about Trea Turner. They'll probably do a whole lot of talking about the Phils. They'll probably, for the 40th time, try to figure out how he's going to take in the draft. But that's not what this show does. This show rides the hot hand. And right now, the biggest thing going right now in Philadelphia, you can make the case for the Union, which I meant to have somebody on this week to talk about the Union starting off 2-0. We'll get to the Union because they're playing very good soccer. But really, the trade deadline is what we're all here for because ultimately, it's trade deadline day, and people are allowed to get excited. Now, whether or not they should be as excited as they may feel right now, I don't know. Because there were some things going around last night that made me think, shit, they're not going to do anything, are they? But we did get a little bit of clarity because 2 trades either went down or are close to going down, even as of Friday morning. One of them is official, and one of them could be very soon. So let's start at the one that is official, because if you watched the Press Row show last night, we were talking about the fact that Mikko Rantanen and even a Brock Nelson becoming available potentially, that could kind of set the market, and that if you're the Flyers, you want to see how that shakes out to help you kind of figure out value. And in addition to that, other teams want to see where that market gets set so that they're not overpaying for a Scott Laughton or a Rasmus Ristolainen. So this is one trade that went through late last night, right on the dot at midnight. It went official. We were talking about this potentially going through last night, although Toronto was interested in Brock Nelson. They did not get him. Brock Nelson goes to the Avalanche, 50% retained salary, and William Dufour for Cal Ritchie, Oliver Kylington, a 2026 first-round pick, and a conditional 2028 third-round pick. I mean, it's very far away. And Saravalli adds here, Cal Ritchie is a can't-miss prospect. So, in theory, the Isles get a very nice return on Brock Nelson. That return was probably aided by the fact that they're going to eat 50% of his contract. But Nelson is a very good player, and he's going to fortify that Colorado lineup. So now that Nelson is off the board, now that teams that were looking at him as a potential center option, the center market has been drying up of late. Scott Laughton is certainly not Brock Nelson. The best version of Scott Laughton is certainly not close to the best version of Brock Nelson. But now that Nelson is gone, could a couple of the teams that might have gone out of the running for one Scott Laughton, could they come back in? A couple days ago, Darren Drager put out that there were 8 teams circling Scott Laughton. And as of last night, we were talking about this on Press Row Show, but it was more that no, it could be 5 or 6 teams. There might have been a couple of teams that dropped out. Now, New Jersey was an interesting one to keep an eye on because New Jersey presumably wanted to add a good locker room guy, add another good depth guy. But the Jack Hughes injury could have really changed that because that's your best player. Does New Jersey think that they're still good enough to make a run? If so, fortifying their lineup with a Laughton probably helps. It certainly isn't a replacement for Jack Hughes, but it's still a good option. Washington has been interested. The team that beat the Flyers last night really curb stomped them. It was a 4-1 final, but it really was like a 4-0 game. Mishkov had a garbage time goal. It was a nice shot, but it was a garbage time goal. That team, the Jets, they're interested in Scott Laughton. So that's at least 3. 2 that are local, New Jersey, Washington. And then you have Winnipeg. Toronto has long been in the Laughton and Risto sweepstakes. They have expressed interest about both of those guys pretty consistently, I think, over the last year or 18 months. They're always kind of keeping tabs on the status of those guys. Does losing out on Brock Nelson change Toronto's decision-making process? It might. Now, the bigger thing, and this is where you should get at least a little bit excited if you're a Flyers fan. Like if you were worried that no trades are going to go down today, I have good news for you. Because if this were to go through, if this were to happen, it sets the market and it gives Danny Briere everything he needs to be able to try to start really collecting offers today for Laughton. Saravalli put this out at 2:18 a.m. I don't know why I woke up at 2:18 a.m. or somewhere around it, but Saravalli put this out. Again, 2:18 a.m. Belief is that Dallas, the Stars, and Mikko Rantanen's camp are actively negotiating a new contract with Carolina's permission, and a trade is conditioned on an extension. If that price is met, which it hasn't been yet, then Mikko Rantanen is expected to become a Dallas Star. Now, that's a huge development. That is a massive development. We're going to probably dissect this tomorrow on the Press Row Show, but if Rantanen is ultimately dealt prior to the deadline, there are going to be a lot of questions around what the hell Tulski's doing down in Carolina. They made a massive trade with Colorado earlier this season, and the thought was go out and get Rantanen, at least go on one potential cup run with Rantanen, try to convince him that it is a place that he would want to plant roots and stay long-term. But they didn't get an extension in place when they executed the trade. There was a ton of risk that they were willing to accept by not having him sign an extension. And either they thought that the culture, that the facilities, that the location, whatever, was going to resonate with Rantanen. And the idea was, well, listen, even if they don't bring him back, it's a ballsy move, and it's going to set Carolina up to be a cup favorite. And now here we are, is it a month and a half later? And Carolina is actively looking to move Rantanen. That is insane. I would call that organizational malpractice. I would consider that a really bad thing for the National Hockey League. The idea that you would go out and get one of the best players who, by the way, not a lot of teams knew was available in Rantanen. The fact that they went and they pulled off that blockbuster trade to bring him into Carolina only to turn around and potentially trade him right before the deadline. I mean, I don't know what the haul they're going to get back from Dallas is. And maybe it's something amazing. And maybe it's a couple of guys that are under contract long-term, and ultimately Carolina is going to be a better team for it. But, man, this is about as brutal as it gets. Kudos to Dallas, though, because Dallas is doing one of two things here, right? Or one of two things will happen. Either Dallas is going to get this extension agreed to, and they're going to execute this trade, and they're going to bring a great player in and Mikko Rantanen, and they're going to lock him up long-term, maybe $12 million plus per year. I thought I saw somebody put out $14 million plus might be the ask. Dallas can get an absolute stud and lock him in long-term, and that'd be great. The other thing, though, is because there's this belief that they're actively negotiating a contract, it essentially pulls Rantanen off the market right now for other West Coast teams, Western Conference teams. So if you're Dallas, you're probably negotiating in earnest. But in a worst case scenario, you don't come to an agreement, and I assume that Carolina is smart enough to kind of put a deadline on the extension talks. But all of this is happening while maybe other Western Conference teams that would have been interested in Rantanen aren't able to negotiate and aren't able to try to get the player because now Carolina might be tunnel focused on just Dallas. And that is a very wild place to be. Now, again, if Rantanen is moved and we see whatever that haul is, it could be a good thing for the Flyers. And ultimately, once he's off the market, it makes trading Scott Laughton presumably easier. We have seen a lot of trades go down in the last few days that have looked like massive overpays for players that aren't particularly good or great. Laughton is not a great player. Laughton is a solid glue guy, very good leader, can give you some versatility playing center or wing. He's not a guy who fundamentally alters your ceiling in a meaningful way, but he's a guy who can fortify your bottom six. He's a guy that I don't think this Flyers team needs to build around, and he's certainly not a guy that I think they would be willing to turn down a first-round pick to keep. I think if a first-round pick gets offered for Scott Laughton, they're going to take it. Now, if we were to find out after the fact, again, when I do the show later today, if we were to find out that, like, Winnipeg offered a first-round pick for Scott Laughton, but the Flyers didn't want to trade him to Winnipeg because he didn't want to go all the way across the country and they're trying to do right by him, I'll light some shit on fire, verbally, right? Like, that would be organizational malpractice. If all they get offered for Laughton is a second-round pick, listen, I don't know. I don't know. Because here's the thing. For as much as I believe the team is supposed to and should move on from Scott Laughton, I'm also not an idiot. The idea of lowering the ceiling and lowering the floor is taking impact players off the table, taking impact players out of the lineup. I don't think Scott Laughton is an impact player. I don't fundamentally believe that removing Scott Laughton from this lineup is going to crater this team and send them further down and improve their chances of getting that number 1 overall pick. I think trading Risto would do that. I really do believe that trading Risto would be like the fast track to chaos. The same way that the Walker trade last year and then the Sealer injury really doomed the team a year ago. But I don't know what kind of impact trading Laughton is going to have. And so if you're Briere and all you get offered is a second-round pick in 2025, I don't think I take that deal. I really don't. And I know that there are going to be a lot of people upset. And there's probably like 2023, Russ Joy is in the back of my head going, shut the hell up! Take the pick! Here's the thing. They have so many picks, 3 firsts, 4 seconds. If it's a second-round pick in 2025, I don't think I do the deal. I think I wait until the draft. I do. And I hate that. And I don't like it. And it actually kind of upsets me to think about. But I think that at this point, the Flyers are looking more to 2026. They want more 2026 draft capital. They would like to have another massive swing at a draft next year. And again, I don't think that they're going to look to be in that lottery. I think that they're ultimately going to look to be a team that makes the playoffs. But I think that they're going to want to have a bunch of picks in next year's draft. And at this point, they feel very good about what they have between the first and second round. I wouldn't be surprised to see them try to package a couple of those picks together to even take a swing for next year. Could be wrong. Now, I'm going to go over to the comments because I assume that people are going to be very upset that I'm not standing here losing my shit about trading Scott Laughton. But I don't think they're going to take a second-round pick in this draft for him. Landro says that the Drager is reporting the Rantanen deal is not done. Let me see if I can find Drager's latest on that deal. Again, Saravalli said that the belief is that, hold on. We actually have a little bit of Flyers news here. Holy shit. Okay, this is why I love doing the show and why I like doing the show in real time. Darren Drager just put out some fucking catnip for Flyers fans. Hang on to your undie pants. Drager, by God, says Flyers update. Big ask on Ristolainen. First round pick, prospect, and player. Decent chance he stays in Philly. I think he's staying. if they can get a first and a prospect and a player, bye-bye Risto. But decent chance he stays in Philly. I don't see Risto getting dealt. I think the framing of that actually makes it sound like people were of the belief that Risto was going to be gone no matter what. I don't think that's true. Hard to replace. The hard to replace is because he's one of the only big-bodied defensemen they have. I've been saying for a while now, I think that Cam York is probably a better trade candidate. Maybe not at the deadline, but certainly in the offseason. Because he's another smaller defenseman, and I don't think that they're going to go buck wild here with a bunch of small defensemen trying to make a cup run. Teams that missed on Nelson, this is why the Brock Nelson deal going through last night is huge. Teams that missed on Nelson are circling on Laughton, and the price is a haul. What the hell does that mean? Like, in fairness, what does a haul for Scott Laughton look like? I mean, presumably that's a first-round pick, but a haul? A haul would indicate more than a first. I'll tell you what. If Danny Briere is somehow able to get a first-round pick and more for Scott Laughton, oh, I'll be singing that man's praises on the trade deadline show later this afternoon. Like, I'll be the Pied Piper out with like a cute little pan flute, whatever. I'll be singing Danny Briere. I was on the commercial last year, my voice, the Danny Briere. I will be very effusive in the praise of Danny Briere later today if he somehow gets a first-round pick and more for Scott Laughton. But that's why I said the Brock Nelson deal is one of those things that was going to kind of set the market for Laughton. And this Rantanen thing kind of going on over on the side has maybe some impact, but not a ton. The Nelson thing is really the one that had to get done if it was going to happen, and it did. All right, so let's see. Let me go out to the comments and see how people are feeling. Because, again, I believe that there are people that, whatever. Linda Joseph says, wait, you mean the former advanced metrics guy at BSH isn't the qualification everyone thought it was over there? Yeah, I mean, listen, I think he had a really cool, this is Tulski. I think he had a really cool path to becoming a GM of a team. And listen, when he executed the Rantanen trade, I said that was a great move. Like, that's a ballsy move. But now pivoting out of it before the deadline is like kind of a bitch move.
Oh, but he isn't going to resign. You have to get something for him.
I guess, but maybe you should have figured out the extension with the player before you traded for him. I don't know. Call me crazy. Sinister says, if I was Danny, I would trade TK now before his contract kicks in. There's no chance. 0. It won't happen. Will not happen. KDub1323 says, if Carolina gets what turns out to be a big haul for Rantanen, then perhaps it isn't that big of a deal for Carolina. They end up trading Natchez for a good return from Dallas. Yeah, I don't know. Jay Grebby says, expecting a very Fletcher-like deadline. AJ Snap, good morning, everyone. Happy trade deadline day. Hoping the Rangers don't shit the bed. AJ is our resident Rangers fan. I think they're going to make the playoffs. They're getting closer. Greg Bondarenko says, I hope Danny doesn't do what Fletcher did when he was shopping JVR. I wonder, did Chuck Fletcher pass off the app? Remember the trade app that Chuck was so proud of? No, we put together this app that helps us with the trade value, with figuring out what a player is actually worth so that it's not an overinflated value. We all remember the Chuck Fletcher days, right? We all remember the way that things cratered very late with Chuck Fletcher, right? Right? It was bad. I wonder if the app still exists somewhere within the organization. I'll have to find out. I really will. I don't know. I have to assume that no, they got rid of the app. Nick Bott says, you won't see anything Fletcher-like today. I think he took his trading app with him when he was fired. Sinister says that if you trade TK, that will lower the floor. And that is true. That is 100% true. If they were to trade an impact guy like TK, who only has 2 goals since, January 9th, that's not good. It's 20, what is he up to, 22 games? 24 games with only 2 goals. Not ideal. Trading him would be horrific. Dirch says, we got lucky. We got a first for Walker last year. That doesn't mean we'll get a first for every player we try to ship out. Now listen, I got to blow my nose. I'm not doing this on camera. So we're going to throw this up here real quick. Give me 2 seconds. That was more than 2 seconds, but at least I muted because that was not pretty. Not pretty, folks. Anyway, let's get back out to the comments. Sorry about that. I was like, how long can I go with a very nasally voice where I can feel the congestion, you know? Ford says, I'm not an NHL guy, so I'll ask genuinely, who is the best team currently and what trades could happen today to move the needle for the contenders? Winnipeg is one of those teams that's going to look to make a move. And they could be the team that ultimately trades with the Flyers. I don't know. Are they gonna pull the trigger on a trade? That Winnipeg team has been so good this year that in my mind they almost don't have to make a trade. They have arguably the best goalie in the world right now in Hellebuyck. There's a big part of me that wonders if Winnipeg really needs to make a trade. Could Florida look to do anything else? Toronto, I think, will make a trade. Toronto is going to look. And that's ultimately where I think the Flyers could maybe benefit. Because, again, Toronto has had interest in both Ristolainen and Laughton. Here's the downside with Toronto. They don't have their first-round pick this year. They have a first next year. So if you're the Flyers and you're playing this one intelligently, right, based on what Drager just tweeted out about a half hour ago, if you can get a first-round pick and more, because Nelson is now gone and Laughton is like the belle of the ball, then you should be able to try to get that 2026 first-round pick out of Toronto. You should be able to try to get a first-round pick out of Winnipeg or out of Washington or maybe even out of New Jersey. Now, as I said before, I think that where the Flyers are at right now, organizationally, is they want draft capital for 2026. I don't think that it's a play for 2025 draft picks anymore. So that's another element to this because there are teams that have started to sour on this draft class or believe that, it's not going to be the kind of top-end talent. And then, So if that's the case, maybe asking for the 2026 pick is going to be a hurdle that some teams just aren't willing to clear. Amy says they don't need help to tank the rest of the season. They're doing it themselves already. Yeah, it's been bad. It's bad. And I think it's going to get worse, which is good if you're part of Team Tank. Actually, since I brought up the tank, let's go over and do what we do once a day here now on the Russ Joy Show because it's important. We're going to go over to Tankathon really quick. We're going to check in on your team, your town, your Philadelphia Flyers, who woke up this morning with the 7th best odds of winning the number 1 overall pick at 6.5%. I feel like I've said that a lot in recent weeks. But yes, they wake up with the 7th best odds. We're going to sim this. I will point out that there was the one day that I did this and they got the first pick. Pretty much every other time that I've done this on this show or over on Snow the Goalie, they have dropped, typically to number 8. With all of that in mind, let's see. Where would the Flyers land if this simulated draft lottery were to come to fruition? Everybody get ready. Drum roll, please. They stay at 7. Nashville jumps 2 spots. Fucking Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh somehow jumps up to one of the top 2 spots. I might legitimately lose it. Okay, so not a great one, but the Flyers don't move down. So I guess all things considered, it could be worse, right? Okay. Let's see. Nick Bott says, do you see the rumored price Danny said on Risto, a first prospect and a player? If that ends up being the cost, there is no team that's going to meet it. None. I don't see a scenario where any team wants to meet it. And by the way, Dallas was being viewed as maybe a dark horse for Risto. If they're going to execute a trade for Rantanen, with all they're going to have to send to Carolina, there's no chance they're going to make a trade for Risto. Again, I would be shocked if they moved Rasmus Ristolainen today. Shocked. Legitimately surprised in every way. Nick Bott also says, if Brant Clark is available, I'd be really upset if Danny hasn't at least set up an offer at least. Here's the thing. I think that Briere is an active enough GM that if there's a player that is legitimately on the market, he's checking in on the player. How serious of an offer is being kind of put out on the table, I don't know. But I do think that he checks in on a lot of these guys. Jamie Rollo says, it's a total seller's market. Not trading a minimum of Laughton and Risto would be malpractice for the rebuild. I unfortunately disagree because I don't think that they're going to get a haul for both. Now, again, if they can get a first and then some for Laughton and a first and then some for Risto, then by all means, trade them both. I'll drive them to the airport myself. No, I won't. But it would be interesting. I just don't see it. I don't see both of those guys getting dealt. Now, again, if two teams get desperate and they're willing to trade you legitimate draft capital, maybe even a prospect, then you certainly have to consider it. There is a possibility that the Flyers could get their doors blown off with a trade offer today. Wink Whitmer over on X says, if Briere doesn't sell today, it's time to stop lying to the fan base about a bogus rebuild. As I said a few times, and I feel like I'm repeating myself a lot, but if they only get offered a 2025 second-round pick for Laughton, I'm not going to blame them for not trading him. I would say hang on until the draft and try to get a pick for next year. But if there's a first-round pick or even more available to Danny Briere for Scott Laughton and he doesn't trade him, then I'll 100% agree with you. And if a first-round pick and then some is offered for Risto without having to retain any bad salary, oh yeah, you make a trade. Without a doubt. Let's see. Raymond Sepper says, Toronto probably has to beat both Florida teams who loaded up to get to the conference finals. They need to make a deal to do it. Danny has what they need. That is true. I don't know. Can Laughton? There's no way. Can Laughton get you the 2026 first in Minton, where like you at least have a guy in the pipeline who's young, and there are conflicting views on how high his ceiling is, but like that'd be insane. But that is like where, as a GM of a team that doesn't have expectations like the Flyers, you can sometimes take advantage of a team that has all the pressure in the world on them. And Ray is right. Both Florida and Tampa Bay have made deals because they are trying to do as much as they can to get themselves to a conference final and get themselves to a Stanley Cup. Toronto, I think, does need to improve. If they get through the deadline without a deal, that will be a failure for them. Let's see. Sinister says, Danny needs to grow a pair and screw the culture, trade Laughton for best offer, Risto and York. They're not trading all three of those guys. If you set yourself up with the hope that there's going to be 3 trades today, I think you're out of your mind. The only way the Flyers make more than one trade today is if they get their socks blown off. And we'll know that because of the return haul. Like, this isn't going to be like a hockey 1-for-1 trade. Like, you're not going to see them trade. Well, let me change it like this. They're not going to trade like Ryan Poehling for a 3rd-round pick. Could they trade Andrei Kuzmenko for a mid-round pick at the last minute? Sure. I don't think they're going to bring Kuzmenko back next year. And so to that end, you take whatever you can get for him as long as it's not offensive, right? But if you get like a 3rd, yeah, sure. Trade Andrei Kuzmenko. That's fine. Does it really lower your ceiling, lower your floor? I don't know. It certainly gets rid of one of the guys who's proven to be able to score some goals here of late. I don't know if it really changes that much. But I don't see them doing like a 1-for-1 hockey trade today. Could they be in the market at some point for a 1-for-1 hockey trade for like a York, or I don't think they'll trade Emil Andre. York to me is like the guy that doesn't have a long future ahead of him in Philly. If you just kind of read the tea leaves. But I don't think they're going to get desperate and make a bad trade today. Let's see. Dirch says, here's the other problem with the Flyers. Our trade block guys have been out there for years. Other teams know that and lowball with that knowledge. Yes and no, because again, it comes back to whether or not a team is legitimately desperate enough and if they really need those pieces in order to get over the hump and get themselves to a Stanley Cup final. Wink checks back in and says, Danny Boy is overplaying his hand thinking he's going to get a first-round pick and possibly more for Laughton. Here's the thing. Drager put that out, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's true. Or it doesn't necessarily mean that that is the actual asking price. GMs like to use the national media pundits as leverage, as negotiating leverage. So sometimes they feed partial truths. So it's kind of, it doesn't necessarily mean that you should take what Drager tweeted as gospel, I guess is my point. And by the way, if you're the Flyers, you should be asking for a lot because you do have a few of these contending teams over the barrel. Now, again, if ultimately we get through this deadline and Laughton is still here, Risto's still here, York, Kuzmenko, everybody, if no one's been dealt, I'll have a very different sound this afternoon. I don't expect them to make multiple trades, but I think one is enough. Let's see. Jay Grebby asks, curious what you think the Flyers could get back for York and what teams would be in the mix. Saw yesterday you gave him a 40-something% chance of being moved. Yeah, I put out a tweet yesterday, and I think, not that it got misinterpreted, but I guess it's probably worth explaining myself, explaining like what the purpose of the tweet was and like what it meant, I put out trade percentages, right? About Laughton, Risto, Cam York, and Andre Kuzmenko. So let me pull the tweet up. I'm going to explain the rationale here. And like, listen, in my head it made sense, but to the rest of the world it might not have because I've got a very complicated brain. I said just over 24 hours away from the trade deadline. Here are my likelihood percentages for the Flyers. I said Laughton, 75% chance. I'd stand by that. I think he's going to get dealt. Risto, 20%. The 20% implies that like there are teams that are interested, but I really don't think the Flyers have any interest in trading him. It would take blowing their socks off for them to trade Risto. Cam York, I gave 46%. Why? Because you can see 46% there and Kuzmenko 52%. So it's like why one versus the other. Kuzmenko doesn't make sense here as a long-term piece. And again, I don't think that they're actively looking to bring Kuzmenko back. So I would say that it should be like a 75 or 80% chance that Kuzmenko gets dealt. But to this point, they haven't gotten a lot of interest on Kuzmenko, so you drop the percentage. He should be a higher percentage, but because there haven't been any real concrete discussions about him, I lower the percentage. But it's still over 50, which means I think there's still a better chance than not that he gets dealt. Cam York is sort of the inverse. I think that there have been enough teams that have checked in or expressed interest in Cam York that the Flyers have had some discussions about whether or not moving York could make sense. But I still put it under 50% because I don't think they'll deal him now. But I do think that there's a very high likelihood that by the draft, they're trading Cam York. So I don't know if that makes sense to everybody or not, but like in my mind, it does. I use that 50% kind of as the barometer. You go over, better chance than not that they're traded. You go under, lesser chance. But to me, there's all these variables that are at play. Teams have checked in on York. Teams have not checked in on Kuzmenko. Kuzmenko makes no sense long term, so you go from 80% down to 52%. York is a guy that I think they've gotten enough that they'd be interested, but I don't think they will believe that trading York right now gets them the best possible offer. All right, so I've explained to you how my brain works, and sometimes it works in mysterious ways. Let's see. JH says, late to the party, but still here. Nick Bott calling out one of the things that drove me nuts last year. Danny said last year a team would have to overpay for Laughton. He said, we won't take market value. He said, we'll only take above market value. And I said that was insane. Again, if all you're going to get is a 2025 second-round pick, fine. Hold on to him till the draft. But you better fucking trade him this offseason. You can't go into next season with Scott Laughton on the team. You want to trade him at the draft? Fine. You start the season with him. His ass better be gone by the trade deadline. We can't be here a year from now talking about,
Oh, this might be the year Scott Laughton. Oh, maybe at the draft.
Nope. And especially with everything that's going on right now in the trade market, I would be absolutely mortified if the Flyers don't move off of him at some point. I'm looking for the most recent thing just to see if anything else went through with Rantanen. As of right now, I don't see anything about Dallas executing the trade yet. So by the time we get together this afternoon, we'll find out for sure what happens. But boy, oh boy. Let's see. I'm going to get to a couple other ones here, and then we're going to roll because I'm going to be back this afternoon. And we have no idea how well any of this is going to age between now and the end. So let's see. Timpo says, it doesn't make it any less stupid. I don't know what this was referring to, but says it doesn't make it any less stupid acting like a 30-year-old third liner or some amazing trade piece when your organization is supposedly rebuilding is a joke. Fundamentally, I understand the idea. Bottom six forward, trade him for what you can trade him for. If you have leverage, use your leverage. And now that Nelson has been dealt, you presumably have some leverage. Some. Will they get a first plus? I have no idea. Probably not, but maybe. Maybe. We'll find out. Let's see. Anything else we wanted to get here? Jay Grubby says, Risto is the number one defenseman on TSN's trade bait board at this time. I don't see... If Risto's gone by the afternoon, I'll be shocked. Legitimately shocked. But again, we'll be here later this afternoon. Jay Grubby says, before Laughton signs an extension July 1st, stop. We're not doing this. We're not doing this. Frank Casello checks in, says, I'm hearing Laughton to Toronto for Cowan and a 2026 second-round pick. Would love to know where that came from. Absolutely would love to know. Okay. I think I'm good. I want to thank everybody who joined. There's a lot of people. More people than normal over on the Russ Joy Show channel. I see some people over on the Joy Media channel as well. If you haven't done so already, like the video, share the video, and subscribe to the channel. I'll be back around 3 o'clock. Keep your eyes peeled on this channel over on YouTube. This will also stream on Facebook and X and be available in podcast feed, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Pandora, Amazon Music, wherever you get your podcasts. I'll be back later this afternoon. We will react to what will hopefully be a flurry of deals, or a worst-case scenario. I'm just going to let everybody rant and rave, and you can be angry, and you can voice your concerns about the lack of trades made by the Flyers. But as things stand right now, Friday morning, I am willing to extend grace to this organization. Scott Laughton better be traded by 3 o'clock. Has to be traded by 3 o'clock. If I come back here this afternoon and the Flyers haven't executed a trade, I'm going to be fire and brimstone here. And boy, oh boy, that'll make for an interesting afternoon show, my friends. Timpo asks, Russ will say, what if when Tanny does nothing today? I don't know what that means. I'll have a lot to say. If there are no trades made, I'll have a lot to say. I'll also do a little bit of digging around. Maybe I'll ask a couple of people who would know some things today. Get a little bit better context about what the actual trade offers might have looked like if nothing goes through. Let's say this. High percentage chance Laughton is dealt. Very low percentage chance that Risto is dealt. But if somebody meets the asking price that Drager put out there, a first, a prospect, and a player, bye-bye Risto. Let me know what you think in the comments section below, and I'll talk to each and every one of you later today around the trade deadline here on the Russ Joy Show. Until then, I've been Russ Joy, but you knew that already because you're smart, and it's also the name of the show. Talk to many of you later this afternoon. Danny, please make a trade.